What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the show. This is The Bader Show. I'm Mark Bader, and today is May 20th, 2025, episode 445, and a great guest for today. I think he's been on the show multiple times. I know he's been on the show multiple times, a few times in the past, but four-time NCAA champion Cornell. You guys know who he is. Just qualified for Final X a couple weeks ago. Yianni Diakomihalis. Yianni, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
excited to talk a little bit.
Awesome. Always fun to talk with you. Final X right around the corner. 70 kilos. You're up for weight class. But I do want to go back. And we were just talking about this. Your senior year of college, you're going for your fourth NCAA title. And I guess let's just set the stage with what your dad and your dad and you and your wrestling career and how that's kind of been those three things have been tied together.
Yeah. So my dad has coached me for as long as I can remember, right? And there's been other coaches, that have helped me along the way, but my dad has been my coach. Even, I had practice today and he was there. And now he's taken a little bit more of a back seat where he just now it's just he likes to see what I'm working on and see how I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, my dad tells the joke, he used to get so stressed out for my matches when I was little, 9, 10 years old. He's like, well, I'll just get him so good I don't have to worry about it anymore, which is funny because I'm sure it got a lot more stressful for him, right? But he's coached me, forever, and because of that, our relationship is we're very close, and a lot of our conversations are about wrestling, my wrestling, other people, just it's became a huge part of both of our lives because of it.
Is it like a dad coach blend, or is there a hard line where it's we kind of?
My dad's funny because he's got a little bit of this it's a blend, right? There's times where he's being my dad, and there's times where he's being my coach. But the line, we definitely tango back and forth on it, right? He might call me, to ask me about. When I was in college, right, he might call me to ask about school and then be like, well, when's your next practice? What are you working on, right? And then it's well, how are your friends doing? And, I saw this knee pull. You should really work on this, right? So it's a little back and forth between it, right? And I used to talk about it when I was younger, right? It's kind of frustrating having your dad as your coach because it's your coach got mad at you at practice and then you go in the living room and he's sitting right there. But as I've gotten older, I've came to really appreciate having that dynamic.
Sure. Yeah. And I've seen him around at tournaments. I know you guys have a close bond, and that's great. And I guess something I wanted to get into, and I had known about this and I didn't know all the details, but basically during your senior year, right, you're going for your fourth NCAA title. And, I hear rumblings in this office, hey, something's going on with Yianni's dad. And, he was sick, or I didn't know all the details, but there was something kind of serious, and it's wow, what the pressure Yianni's got to be under just to try to all the lights and all the attention about trying to win a fourth title, and now something's going on with his dad. Can you kind of catch us up to speed or give us the rundown on what was going on or if everything's okay?
Yeah. I mean, now he's doing good. He loves golf. He golfs again. He's back coming to practice a lot. So now he's kind of found his new normal, right? But right around end of January, beginning of February, my senior year, I was actually going to a night class, a 7 p.m. class, and my dad calls me and he's a little bit of a casual guy, but he's hey, just letting you know, I remember we had wrestled Brown and Harvard that weekend, and he was I'm sick, I'm not going to come. And I was well, whatever, it's a random dual meet in, middle of the season, who cares? And he called me on Monday and was hey, just so you know, I saw the doctor, they're pretty sure I have cancer. Why don't you and your brothers come home? And I was what? And he's yeah, I don't know. They're telling me. And basically what we ended up finding out that week is he had this pretty, the word, it's not a good word to hear when you hear this from a doctor, but they're yeah, he's a really aggressive T-cell lymphoma. And you're well, that doesn't sound good. So I spent that week home with him. Once we kind of talked to the doctors and it kind of got left off as this we're going to do chemo and see what happens. We were okay. So I went back to school. I actually wrestled Columbia I literally got back Friday and we wrestled Columbia on Sunday. And wrestled that match. And then pretty much every weekend that we weren't wrestling, or if there was a weekend that we were, that Mike was like, hey, don't worry about it. I would just go home or like try to see how my dad was doing. He had been in the hospital for a few weeks. Like I remember I missed the Ohio State duel and people were like, my friends still joke and they call me Duck Boy for skipping that match. But
So yeah.
I was home literally seeing my dad in the hospital. And you know, he went on like a pretty intense chemotherapy rotation. And actually the first time he went to watch me wrestle in person was the NCAA tournament in Tulsa. The doctor was like, hey, like your immune system's really compromised. Like, I'm not sure if you should go. My dad's like, well, how risky is it? He's like, pretty risky. But my dad was like up in one of the boxes and he's like, well, if you're up in the box and you're really careful about who's in there, I think it'll be okay. And my dad's like, well, if like watching this moment for my son is what gets me a little bit more sick, it's probably worth it. Like he was like, I wouldn't have missed that for anything. So he ends up, making it. I won and everything worked out there. And then that was all 2023. And then I ended up not making the team that year. And then in October, he had a bone marrow transplant. We found a donor, which is really fortunate. And, we're really thankful about that. And that, took a while to kind of, he pretty much had to reset his immune system. He had to get like revaccinated with everything. Like, again, like he was a baby. He had to spend another month or two in the hospital. And then after that, there's a lot of aftermath, right? Like when you have something like that, you get the flu and you're on the couch for a weekend, but like if he got the flu, like there's a serious, danger for him, right? So we had to be very careful, like seeing him and, because of that, it's tough, right? Because I mean, for us, it's tough because it's like, our dad's really sick and we want to see him. But for him, it's tough because it's like he's locked in the house all day. He can't really come watch us wrestle. And that's like, that's our thing, right? He wants to be there for everything. So it was a really scary time. And we're kind of on, around the other end of it now, right? I mean, I guess you never know, but he's doing really well. Like I said, he came to the Open. He's coming to practice again. He's golfing, doing the things he likes. So when you have something like that happen, it kind of gives you a new perspective of just like, yeah, I really want to make this world team, but like at least no one's sick. Or, I had a bad day at practice. It just kind of helped me, take the pressure off a little bit. It was like, yeah, I had a bad day at this workout, but like, my dad had a good day in the hospital. So it's all, evens out. But yeah, I mean, it's tough dealing with that, and I'm the oldest. So I think a lot of it, I don't want to say falls on me, but a lot of it was like, up to me a little bit. So it's tough at times, right? But it's all good now.
Throughout all of that, whether it's your senior year or I guess the fall of 23 or all that you're speaking of, like, what was the toughest for you? Whether I guess emotionally would be maybe this somehow you missing practices, but I'm physically affected you. But probably like when was the toughest for you to like right when you found out, or was there a part when it was the worst? Like what was the and you like I said, your pressure of trying to win 4 and all that.
Yeah, I mean, right away the beginning was really scary, right? Because you start Googling and like. If anyone who's listening, you have someone who's sick, like the worst thing to do is Google. Like we're seeing, me and my brother are seeing these like really high mortality rates of these things that he's got. And we're like, what the heck? I mean, there were, the first couple months were really hard. There was a lot of times of talks of like, like it didn't immediately get better. It wasn't like we found out in January and then February he was doing better. So it was scary, right in the beginning was definitely the hardest part. And, I think with something like that, it's like, as time goes, you kind of learn to ride those waves a little bit better. But, in the moment, like finding that, like, walking into a class and getting a call from my dad that would normally be like, hey, how's practice? Like, how's your wrestle? To like, hey, I'm sick. I have this cancer. Like, you need to come home. It's one of those things like my dad would never ask me to do anything. He would never be like, hey, can you come see me? So when it's like, you need to come home tomorrow or tonight, you're like, well, okay, this isn't good, right? And then you start looking stuff up, and yeah, I guess like from January to really like April, May, maybe June a little bit is when it started. It was it was really tough. After that, he kind of started to live a little bit better, and when that bone marrow transplant kind of got brought up was kind of a time where everything was leveled out, and that was really when things started to shift in a positive direction.
So he got the transplant, and then it was like, okay, I feel like better.
Yeah. After that, it was just like, in a weird way, it's like, stay away from me. You know what I mean? Because once you have the transplant, there's a I think it's a 60-day window. It might be a 30-day window. I don't exactly know. There's a window where it's like, hey, if you get this far removed from the procedure with no complications, it worked. And he kind of had hit that point. I mean, he dealt with some like GVHD kind of stuff, but for the most part, it was good, right? And then after that, it was just like we had to be really careful seeing him because it's like, especially for my brother, right? Because I was out of college at that point, but like he's in school, like you interact with so many people just like going to class and going to a dining hall. You carry some random flu home, and now it's like he could get really sick. So we kind of had to be careful, how often we saw him, and if we felt, any remote sniffle, it was like, don't come home, don't see him. He actually had like a minor setback this past November. Yeah, November. Where he had to go and he had like, some, like I said, you get a little thing and it becomes a big thing. So he had one minor setback in November, but for the most part, it's been really good. And yeah, I guess I'm kind of rambling, but yeah.
Cool. Well, obviously we're glad to hear he's better and he's doing well. And I've met your dad. I know him and I think he's awesome. So I know you guys' relationship's amazing. So glad hopefully people can know what you were dealing with and are relieved for you that seems like the dust has settled and things are heading in the right direction.
Yeah. He's doing better, and we're all really thankful for that.
For sure. All right, well, let's talk some wrestling. I want to go back to 2024 at the Olympic trials. Obviously you've moved up since then, so clearly it seems like probably weight wasn't easy at that point, right? Walk me through like the process of making weight, how you felt, and how you felt like you competed.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real way to say this without making it sound like a big, huge excuse, right? And I'm not saying if the weight cut had gone better, I would have made the team. But each weight cut got a little bit more difficult, right? Like I medaled in 22, and then I would say, my trouble with weight probably started around like that final X time in 2023. Which is, looking back on it, like 49 got tough to make, which is probably a sign that 43 is going to be really tough. But for the 24 trials, it just kind of stuck to me, like workouts that might have normally been 5 or 6 pounds were turned into like 3-pound workouts. And then your 3-pound workouts are turning into 1-pound workouts. And like the day before, it ended up being like a 3 or 4 hour process to get, 4 pounds off me. And I had started at 6 over. So it that day before was very long. That was probably the Olympic trials weight cut was, by far the toughest weight cut I've ever had in my entire life. But, after, and obviously when you have something like that, you're not going to wrestle great. So I ended up losing to Mendez, he's very tough. Obviously he's very good. He had a scrap with Rutherford the next match. But after that, it was just really frustrating, right? Because, it had been like this for the last couple tournaments I competed in where it's like, I'm wrestling really great in the room. I feel really good. And then weight cut hits and you're not going to feel good when you're down to weight, but then I'm not really bouncing back, and I had been doing a lot of different, scientific, how can we manage my supplements, my food, my water, my diet, my, cross training, how many things can we try to control to make this better? But at some point it's like, you're kind of big for the weight. And, in hindsight, right, I probably needed to do it, like put in air quotes, right, like the unhealthy way, just starve some muscle off my body and then make that cut a little bit easier. But I was just at a size, from all the training I was doing, I guess, and maybe just, maturing and growing up a little bit where, to hold all the muscle I had, it turned into a huge cut. And you know, it kind of just, by the time we got to the Olympic trials, everything stuck to me and it became really difficult to come off. So at 70 kilos, I feel a lot better. You know what I mean? I'm around 160, 162, you know, and eating really healthy, training, you know, once or twice a day. So I'm still I think I'm the right size, right? But if I was 160, you know, maybe a little lighter, right? 57, 58, doing that when you're lean, 15 pounds of water can start to become difficult, right? And, you know, then the next question I always get asked is like, well, what about the Olympic year? And, like I said, I either got to put a little muscle on or pull a little muscle off. But, you know, that's kind of a question that we can figure out down the line.
Yeah, fair enough. And I watched you on Bash a couple weeks ago. I watched that because I didn't want to ask all the same questions, but it was interesting because I saw, you know, you had an injury, you were off the mat for like a year, and at some point there, maybe you contemplated retirement. Is this accurate, or at least to a small degree? Maybe not contemplated, but maybe it floated through your head.
Yeah, well, because you know, I had medal. I kind of felt like I made the team in 21, made the team in 22. I kind of like broke through, right? And then, you know, I didn't wrestle great at Pan Am's, right? Like I had kind of had a tight match with Dexter Betts, who I had beaten more handily, you know, earlier in my career, right? And then I lose to Nick Lee, who I'd beaten in college, and he's tough, right? But it just was like, hold on, you know, I kind of thought I was going this way, and then it felt like I was going this way, right? And looking back, you know, again, you know, maybe the weight played a role, but then I don't make the Olympic team, and then I tear my labrum, right? And I'm like, man, I keep getting hurt. I can't freaking make weight the right way. Like, you know, at what point is it, I don't want to make it, again, it's like an excuse, but at what point is like my body just kind of betraying me, right? And I think there was a lot of pressure maybe on this US Open, right? Because if I had gone out there and gotten hurt again or just wrestled really poorly, it's like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, I'm working really hard. I feel like I know how to wrestle. But obviously my competition's not showing that. So maybe there's something going on where I need to step away and come back. You know, you see guys, they take time off and come back. But, you know, I just kind of knew that I had more, but it's frustrating, right? Going a year plus of not really wrestling a match that you're proud of. And then it's like, this sucks. Like even when I'm winning, I'm like frustrated with how I'm competing. At what point is this going to become like a rewarding process, you know?
So what made you say, all right, forget that. I'm back in, or I'm not, you know, I'm not stepping away. I'm not taking that break. I'm guessing maybe this was combined with bumping up.
Yeah. I think, you know, like ironically coaching helped, right? Because I got to kind of step away from it and just kind of enjoy what I was doing. I was hurt and you know, I just failed to make the Olympic team. I had, you know, not made the team the year before. Then I got hurt. I missed this trials and I'm like steaming from my ears, you know? But I had a really good group of kids this year at our gap years. I really, really like them and just being around them, you know, it's like everything's positive, everything's good. And honestly, having talks with those guys about how to deal with, you know, when you're frustrated or some match anxiety, you know, or whatever it is, it's like kind of taking my own advice. And then I remember the clicking point for me. We had Ray Higuchi in town and he was wrestling with Vito. And like, all I could think is like, man, I wish I could get in there, but I was hurt. At that point I was still in the sling, maybe just out of the sling. And I'm like, man, I would kill someone to get in there. And I was like, well, these are not the thoughts of a coach, you know, these are the thoughts of a guy who's still going. So I'm like, let's just make sure the shoulder recovery process goes really well and kind of see what happens. So I had been wrestling well. My shoulder felt really good. And then, you know, I just never really looked back. The Open went really well. So it kind of confirmed, you know, hey, you're not done. You're not done. You have more good wrestling ahead of you, you know?
It's almost like you got forced into the position of stepping away, right? As in being injured and having to be off the mat. And that was what you needed to look in there and be like, no, I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. I want to get on the mat and like do this. So,
yeah. It's like, you know, the Christmas Story where he shows him his grave and he's like, this is you. It's the ghost of Christmas future. It was like me, like in my shoulder sling, I'm running practice and coaching. And I'm like, man, you know, I liked it. I really enjoyed it, but it was like, get me back in there a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know?
When was it the absolute decision made, like going up to 70? Was it right after the trials in 24? Was it somewhere in between? Was it you, Mike, your dad, or what combination of minds in this?
It was pretty much right after the trials, but I feel like we all kind of knew. It was one of those things, like, it's weird to laugh about, but like going into the trials, now looking back on it, I knew, I'm like, all right, I am not really going to be 100%. So let's just see what I can, like, let's make it happen. You know what I mean? And we'll figure it out from there. But as soon as it was over, like, you know, before I probably even got dressed, it's like after my match against Mendez, Mike was like, hey, we're not doing this again. You're going 70 and, you know, we'll figure out in 26 or 27 kind of how your weight has changed from just the break and go from there. Right. So, you know, like I said, that it got decided literally the day, minutes after my semifinal match. But I think if you had sat Mike Gray or my dad down or hooked me up to a lie detector test, I probably knew, like, all right, we need to go up after this.
Yeah. All right.
You know,
I guess if you know, have you felt any differences wrestling at 70? I think the Open maybe was your only time.
that was the first time. Yeah.
But what was the difference? Speed, size, strength? Did you notice much?
You know, the biggest thing I noticed, really, I feel like I when I was younger, like, I wrestled really hard, and I used to always say that. Like, I'd go back and watch matches from like high school or my freshman year and be like, man, I actually wrestled pretty hard, and I feel like I kind of lost a little bit of that. If you watch, like, not like, if you watch, there's a lot of match managing that goes on towards the end of those, you know, 22, 23, even like 2024 matches. But I feel like at the Open, I felt like I could wrestle hard. Like, I was coming off the mat and being like, that was good. You know what I mean? And I had a lot of matches where I came off and I was like happy about it, you know? And like, I didn't have a lot of matches I was really happy about, even the matches I won, even, you know, winning my 4th national title. I'm kind of coming off and being like, I could have wrestled better. Like, what's going on, you know? And I think we changed my training a little bit, which definitely helped. But I also think, like, not really worrying about my weight. Like, I basically hang around 60 or 62 until a couple days before and then reel it in. And by doing that, I think, you know, I can train a lot harder and really push myself in the room, work on stuff, get my conditioning in, and not spend a bunch of energy, like, doing extra cardio, doing extra drilling to help keep myself down. So from a competitive standpoint, I felt like I was in better shape. But I think really what it was is I just had more energy in the match, in the room, you know, in practice to continue to develop myself.
Yeah, and you kind of hit all of it on the head. But like, maybe if you could just like give a PSA to young wrestlers who think cutting weight is the key, right? Why is maybe going up can be more beneficial? All the things you've learned through this.
You know, the way I say it is, like, cutting weight is meant to be a competitive advantage, right? The reason we cut weight in this sport is because, you know, if I'm 160 pounds and I can wrestle guys who weigh 165, or I can wrestle guys who weigh 154, I'll wrestle the guys who weigh 154. But as soon as I'm not getting better at wrestling, you know, training hard, wrestling hard in the match, I'm actually taking away my competitive advantage, right? The whole point of cutting weight is that I'm going to do it in a way where I make weight healthy, and now I'm essentially a little bit bigger than I would have been at the next weight up relative to the field. So as soon as it becomes like I need to sacrifice my technique, my live wrestling, my conditioning to make weight, not only are you not taking advantage of the advantage of cutting weight, but you're also actually zapping your other qualities out of your training, right? So, like, yeah, guys are going to cut weight. It's a part of the sport, but you need to find that middle ground of where it's a competitive advantage, right? You're lean, you're in shape, you're healthy, you're hydrated, and then you go out there and wrestle really hard. You know, whatever that weight class is, right? For some guys, maybe it's 10 pounds, other guys, it's 2, right? You know, but you got to find the weight that you compete the best at, not necessarily just the lightest weight you can get down to.
It's a great way to put it. And can you pinpoint a time when you were like, maybe it was the first time, or maybe it's when the thoughts started to creep in that like, hey, this is no longer an advantage, right? Like what you just said, this is no longer a competitive advantage. It's actually the opposite. And like, I'm sure you didn't realize that till a little bit after it had started happening, or I assume. Maybe I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even really think about it that way. Here's a good example. So I remember I made the world finals in 2022 and I was like 12 and a half pounds over. um, which to me, I'm like, well, whatever. I just made the world finals. So I'm like cutting weight. And
And
then I
happy.
lose to the Iranian in the gold medal match. Um, and I'm just thinking about, coming home, right? Taking silver is funny because there's this weird bitterness about like you lost your last match. You're not like maybe as happy with the whole thing, right? Because it's like it's right there, that gold medal. So I'm thinking back on technically preparation, my conditioning, like all the things that could have gone wrong. And that didn't even cross my mind. And it really didn't cross my mind until probably the US Open, where after the tournament, I was like 5 over, which is the appropriate amount, I would say, to be over
Hmm.
between days. And I worked out for like 40 minutes, pretty light, and like got back down and was all good to go. And I'm like, man, I feel so good. And it kind of clicked. I'm like, you're supposed to feel good. You know what I mean? You're not
Yes.
supposed to be like sunk face, sunk eyes in, like hobble into the scale and then like sprinting to drink. Like
Yeah.
that's when it kind of clicked. Like, man, I really, because you never really know. And as a sport, right? Like there's so many tough guys in the sport. There's a lot of guys. There's guys that are a lot tougher than I am, right? But you never want to admit, like, oh, you know, the admission of like, hey, I'm cutting too much weight in your own brain can be like, this is too hard for me, right? And no one ever wants to admit, like, hey, this is too hard. Um, but really, once it got a little easier, I'm like, man, this is really good. You're just focusing on the wrestling again, and my results so far have definitely improved because of it, and hopefully continue to do so, right? But that's kind of when it clicked. It really was the Open this year.
It's so funny because you kind of nailed it. Wrestlers want to do hard things. And that's like we pride ourselves on like, this is hard. I can handle it. That's what we're built for. But it's like sometimes taking the easy route is actually smarter if it's gonna help you, if it's gonna
Yeah,
help you win. So let's use our brains a little bit too
yeah.
here.
I remember talking to Takatani. He just took silver in the Olympics at 74. And he was just 65, like way back in 2016, and kind of slowly made his way up to 74. And I remember he told me, like, after he wrestled Kyle, he weighed out like half a kilo over. Like, he literally was like cutting no weight. And I asked him, I'm like, how come you never went 70 if you're so light? Like, you didn't want to, like, why don't you go 70? He's like, I didn't want to lose weight. And I was like, he was like, why would I lose weight if I don't have to? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I guess, right? And it's funny, like, it's really like an American thing. Like we want to be like the tough guy, like, or we have almost like a military approach to it, right? The European and Asian wrestlers, they're like, I want to win the match, so this is the way that I'm going to win at, and they kind of just leave it at that. And I've a little bit more of that mentality, I think, than maybe other people, but clearly not enough of it, right? Because he said that, and I was like, you know,
I don't want to cut weight. Well,
he's like, I don't want to. I'm like, yeah, I know you don't want to. Neither do I. And he's like, then don't. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
it sounds way too like it makes way too much sense. Just don't.
Yeah.
I don't. Cutting weight's not fun. Damn, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, cutting weight sucks.
I was
Let's
like,
go
you might
70.
be onto something.
Yeah. All right. Let's kind of get into the U.S. Open. Actually, I want to watch this finals match with James Green. If you got kind of a couple minutes, we can, go
Yeah,
through
cool.
this. And Nikki, our producer, whenever you want to pull that up. But you'd wrestled James 2 or 3 times in the past. You'd had some close matches. What did you think about, or what game plan, or going into this match, thoughts on attacking James or countering James?
Well, I had, I tried to do a really good job of just focusing on the guy I'm going to wrestle. But going into this, James had been scoring a lot, like ear to ear collar tie. He'd snap and then kind of go to his double from there or post, right? So a lot of what I kind of expected was double leg. So it was like, hey, keep one hand down and keep your feet moving. A big thing we've been working on with me, right, is like staying on the guy the whole time. So it was like try not to get slowed down and keep your hands and feet pretty busy, working his head. What I kind of didn't expect was James did a really good job of kind of not I don't want to say shutting it down, but he was going to pick his spots a little more carefully, I think, than I expected him to, just kind of based on his other matches he had wrestled. So once that kind of clicked in my head, it was like, well, I'm gonna need to pick it up even more because he's not going to blow the scoreboard open right now. He's gonna look to score like 1 or 2 really clean shots on me.
So that's like as the match starts, maybe around here at some point, you're making an adjustment in your head based on what you thought was going to happen versus what is actually happening right now.
Yeah. And the other thing is we had wrestled at 67 kilos and 68 kilos. And well, you're like, well, what's 4.5, 5 pounds? Like, what's that jump really gonna do? He did feel a lot stronger because I know how much stronger I've gotten in the last 4 years, and he felt way stronger. So I'm like, okay, clearly those weight cuts were taking something out of him. And I really felt it. Like you can see I'm working his head a lot. And usually I can like snap and clear and re-grab and snap and clear and re-grab. And with him, it was hard to get him off me. You can kind of see there I'm trying to get him off, but he did a really good job of kind of staying in the positions he wanted to force it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, I mean he looks.
Yeah, and there's that shot.
There we go. Head inside. Oof. Heavy hit.
Just fall flat on my face.
Did you get a step out there?
Idiot. Yeah, I scored a push out on that one. Yeah, that's actually when I look at Mike, I think, and I think he does one of those with his hands, and maybe it's this, and he's like, all right, like, let's pick it up a little bit. So again, right, you got to be careful because he's so strong and powerful through the legs that it's like, if you pop your chest up, he's going to bulldoze you maybe for 4. But it's also like, keep yourself busy and don't really give him any break. I think he ends up going on the clock here. And that, what I feel good about is it's like, okay, well, I am wrestling hard. I mean, at least like it looks like it. Because we always make the joke with me, like there's what I think I'm doing, what I'm trying to do. And then sometimes what actually happens out there is not always the same. So I like to go back and watch and just kind of, I know what I'm thinking and what I was trying to do. So it's good to see and just kind of catch the differences, right?
Does that ever happen where you go back and watch a match and you're like, man, I thought I was working hard or controlling center or showing that I'm offensive, but maybe the opposite or something else was happening in reality?
Yeah, even a little bit here, or a good example actually is the match against Daniel Cardenas in the quarters here. I chest wrapped him, and I was 100% sure. I'm like, I didn't go to my back. Like, I popped him. I thought I was like Kyle Dake throwing that guy at the World Cup. I think it was actually a different Takatani from Japan.
Yeah.
And then I go back and watch it, and I'm like, oh, I land flat on my back. And like and then I'm like, well, I came out on top, like, and now I'm sitting here arguing with myself about how bad my chest wrap was. And, it's good, right? Because seeing it, I'm like, oh, I should have done X, Y, and Z when I did A, B, and C. But obviously in the match, right, you're kind of going off feel, going off instinct. So that's why I like to watch myself, probably more than anybody, right? Because it's like, I want to see, and, I want to notice my own tendencies, right? Like, hey, what are the things that I do every match that maybe someone else is going to notice that I got to hide better, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Pretty early in this period, I think with like a minute into it, I take this slow motion, like fall flat on my belly shot. And I remember thinking to myself, I just got to get my hands locked, right? And I, historically, right, I'm a good finisher. Like if I get my hands locked, usually I'll score. I've made mistakes, obviously, but yeah, it's right here. And I'm like, get your hands locked. And then without even really realizing it, I like literally hips, chest, and my face at one point are flat on the mat. That's not good. It's no good. I remember right away, like, what am I thinking? I actually, in the match, being like, that was so stupid. Don't do that. But also, I don't know, in a weird way, not like I didn't feel threatened, but I'm like, all right, I'm losing, but it's like he only scored from me diving flat to my face. So it's like, keep your face off the mat, keep your chest off the mat, and you're safe. So like, let's keep working the head and pulling. And then, if it's like, you don't need to feel panicked right now with 2 minutes to go. Like all you need is a push out. So it's like, let's just keep working and hand fighting and see what opens up. And then with about a minute to go is when you're going to really start picking it up really hard and kind of, I don't want to say forcing, but you start to force the action a little bit more.
Sure.
But right now it's like, let's fake and snap and see what opens up. I don't need to get desperate and put myself in a deeper hole, right? Trying to force a score.
Sure.
One thing I feel like you see with a lot of guys is they get scored on, and right away it's like, let me go get one. And a lot of times that actually leads to a second score for the first guy, right? Because you're like creating this pressure that doesn't really need to be there. Um, and then right around here, it's like, okay, we can start to pick it up now, and where we're gonna really, I don't want to say force the action, but now,
Create.
I mean, you got to do something, right? So
Yeah.
it's gonna be more than faking and snapping. Like you saw that duck attempt, and then I think there's a high crotch here, and we get stuck, and then the score I end up getting to, I'll wait till we get there, but I guess I'm rambling, but that's kind of where you're going to start to pick it up.
Sure. Yeah. And day one, they say, yes, keep your face off the mat. That's great advice. Keep your face off the mat.
Great advice. Do not want your face flat on the mat.
Never.
It's no good. He punches hook and I swim. We started working on that shot a lot. Actually, after Muzad beat me in the World Finals. That was cool.
Yeah. What I was so
We
impressed
started working
was,
that because Muzad killed me with a right hand and underhook. Like I spent basically the whole match getting underhooked. So we had worked on that like pummeling action, and then I actually hit it a little bit, my senior year in college, where it was like pummel, and if he follows, like you can just shoot right off that. And I did. And then once we're here, I kind of knew, again, it's like keep my face off the mat and I'm safe. But if I get my hands locked, I'm going to score again. So there's a shot here that I kind of felt. He starts trying to chase cradle here, and I know I'm safe, but if I pop my head out, I'm going to score. And, you want to finish the match on top, and there's that last takedown.
That's right at the buzzer. Yeah.
About 5 seconds left.
Did that was that like a data point? Did that prove something just to you in your own mind and yourself about, all right, yes, 70. I feel good. I wrestled well. This is where I belong.
Yeah, I think so, right? Because, up until then, right, I had a match go the distance also. So I'm like, James tested. He's medaled. He's the defending rep. I saw someone say like he's never failed to make a team at 70 kilos that he attempted to make. So yeah, right. Like
15.
Every 70 kilo team he's tried to make, he made. So this kind of felt like, all right, this one's going to be real. Not real like the other ones weren't, but it's like, all right, this might be a jump. This is going to really show how I'm doing at this weight, right? And he's pretty big for 70. So I think it also is going to expose how my strength, how my conditioning, those things play in with a full-sized 70-kilo guy.
Yeah. Well, it was a great match for sure, and it put you in the Final X. And as we found out this past weekend, maybe a surprise, maybe not, but he's a fresh face, right? PJ Duke, who a fellow New Yorker. I think I also heard you on that other podcast be like, yeah, James was this old guy, and I was a kid, and or maybe a teenager, and PJ was like a child, a little kid. Maybe give me your background with him, or when he came on your radar. I'm sure I was just some little kid, and then maybe when it ever crossed your mind that y'all might compete.
It's funny. I've known PJ. He took a visit to Cornell, or he had been up to Cornell a lot, but we had known him since he was young. Like he had came to my house like in high school where I grew up and trained with me. I think he was in like 7th grade. And he had already been very good, right? And he's the same age as my younger brother Elijah. And they were pretty tight. So I had just overlapped with him a lot. I know his family pretty well. I would say I'm friends with his family. They're really good people. He's a good kid. He ended up deciding to go to Penn State, which obviously we would have liked to have him. I really like the kid. But I think it kind of clicked because in my mind, it's like, well, this is like Elijah's buddy PJ, and he was very good. But it never really clicked until actually this 2024 trials. He went seniors, he went 70 kilos, and I was like, well, let's see how he does. It's cool. And he took 3rd. I was like, whoa, hold on.
He's really good.
Clearly, he's gotten better. And, he's pretty, I think he's cutting weight for 70. I think he's like a decent size, pretty strong, it looks like. And obviously he's young, so you're going to think he's going to get better, right? So as soon as he started doing well there, when you talk about, the 2028 Olympic team, right?
Sure.
It's like, well, he's probably going to be a guy that I might have to beat. And And then, the question is like, well, is he ready now? I don't know. He had some pretty competitive matches at U20. It's not pretty competitive, but like he had scrap with the Oklahoma State kid, Robideau, and then he had scrap with Melvin Miller. And then he was going to the senior trials like 2 or 3 weeks later. I'm like, man, it's a tight turnaround. And he won. So that's cool. I wonder what he's going to do. I know the U20 trials are in 2 weeks. He's sitting in the finals there, also at 70. I don't know if making Final X is going to affect him competing there or not. But if not, probably watch him there and see what happens, and then get ready to rock at Final X.
Yeah. How will you go about preparing? I'm sure you're familiar with him. Will you watch more film, come up with the game plan? Final X is different than Open or trials where it's a tournament.
Yeah, it's a dual meet.
Yep.
Yeah, we're doing a dual meet to make the team. With PJ, he's pretty good in upper body ties. He's got a good 2-on-1 underhook seatbelt kind of series. He kind of wrestles almost like he wrestles judo. You know what I mean? Where he's shooting, but he's always trying to attack the hips or attack your shoulder. So I think with him, right, it's like good shot selection and just being really disciplined. Ironically, a lot of the things I've been working on kind of are relevant in this match specifically, right? Because it's like, keep your elbows tight, be a good finisher, wrestle really hard. Let's force him to have to stay in shape and keep up with me for 6 minutes. And there's a weird thing, right, in the United States. Not a weird thing, it's normal, but there's almost a trap, right, with kids like this where it's like, well, he's only a high schooler. And it's like, but he is 19 and he just beat all the, of all the other senior level wrestlers that we have available, he beat them, right? So it's like, don't treat him like a high schooler. Don't treat him like a 19-year-old. Don't treat him like a U20. It's like, okay, this is the number 2 guy in America. So I'm going to come in there and wrestle him like my world championship is on the line, because it is, and you can't fall for, oh, he's a kid, right? It's like, I'm going to go in there and wrestle hard, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. Well, that's Prudential Center, June 14th. Best 2 out of 3, obviously, men's and women's freestyle. Greco's already set. So hopefully people are going to make it to attend or be able to tune in and watch. But on that note of PJ and youngsters, and I know Jax is going to wrestle Vito, and just like really this quad, I feel like we've seen the biggest turnover. Jordan's gone. Dake's gone, Jaden Cox is gone, Gilman's gone, and so on, right? Like, we're just seeing this huge turnover. And I don't even know if I have a question as much as I guess that's weird. And you're 26, so you're not like on the old end, but it feels like with all this turnover, you kind of are on the more senior end. Or is that fair?
Yeah, it kind of does. I mean, when you look at the world medalists, right? It's like, anyone who has medaled recently that's still around, it's like Vito, Spencer. I mean, that's it from last year. I think the year before as well. And me, right? So there's a weird, not weird, right? But I think because it was a short cycle, the 2021 Olympics being a year later, I feel like led a lot of guys to think, well, I only have 3 years instead of 4, and they stuck it out.
Yeah.
And then I think before, maybe half the guys would have stepped away in 21 and half would have stepped away in 24. They all stuck it out to 24. And then it feels like this big unraveling, right? You have all these Olympic champions and world medalists that are like stepped away from the sport. But that kind of happens, on an Olympic year. And I think there's a lot of talent coming through. Obviously, these young kids are doing so well at such a young age that you kind of think, if their college coaches do a good job with them, that between the guys we currently have and those kids, 10 years from now, it's still going to be a very solid team. I just think because those guys have been dominant for so long, and a lot of them were dominant at the world level. When you look at a guy like David or, Kyle when he was at 79, and Burroughs pretty much the last 10 or 15 years, right? They were so dominant that it's hard to you hear about these like mythical guys, right? And then you replace them with me. And it's like, well, who's this guy compared to Jordan Burroughs, right? But, like let's say it's David Carr or Mitchell Mesenbrink, right? Like they've never had a chance. For all we know, they're going to show up and win as well,
Yeah.
right? 86, it's going to be man, who's wrestling 86?
Zahid. Kyle.
Yeah, it's Zahid, who he's medaled. Yeah, Zahid's another guy, right? He's one of actually, I forgot to mention, one of the guys who had medaled, right? Zahid and Kyle. That's a bad example, I guess. But it's like,
79.
we have these mythical giant guys, right? And they're being replaced by these guys who people kind of feel are underwhelmed. But it's like, well, let's see what happens when they get there. Maybe they're going to also tear it up. I'm sure people weren't watching Jordan Burroughs in 2010 and saying, hey, this guy's going to be a world champ next year.
Nobody.
Right. And he did it. So I think, there's probably some guy floating around USA Wrestling right now who's going to do that we're just kind of waiting for his time.
And on top of the short quad, from 21 to 24, I feel like we just had an unprecedented, like the stable of horses we had from, Jordan in 11 and 12 or on to 16 and like, it's not normal, right? Like we go back, like I think the mid-late 90s, we had a great run, but it's not like normal for us to have like half the guys on our team be world champs, right? And maybe that's going to be the new normal, but I think we had this really rare breed of talent squeezed in the same time frame, and the COVID thing that's like, wow, this, what a drop off, but it's like, man, this just seems like maybe more normal than crazy. Just
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny the way people talk, right? But a guy will take third in the world championships, and then some 12-year-old kid on Instagram is going to be like, he sucks. He didn't even beat this guy, right? But it's like, Bill Zadek talks about it, right? But like we're spoiled. I mean,
totally.
We've had some seriously like all-time USA Wrestling greats come through the sport in the last 15 years, right? And if we were here and we dropped to here, people will be like, oh, USA Wrestling fell off. But in reality, this level is still going to be a top 5 team in the world, So it's kind of up to, I don't want to say me, right? But maybe, those guys the older guys who have been around to kind of help these younger guys and also like carry on, right? I mean, I've spent 10 years around Kyle Dake and David Taylor and Jordan Burroughs, right? And now, like David and Jordan, they're not competing anymore, but that doesn't mean that I can't take what I've learned, apply it to myself. And then, when I'm coaching or when I'm older, hopefully having accomplished similar things, passing that down to the younger guys. Right. And that's kind of what it's all about, right? You want to leave it a little better than you got it, and that's where I think it's kind of going to fall on. I don't want to say us older guys, cause we're not really older, but the guys who are around to step up and, become those guys. Either that or some 19-year-old kid's going to do it, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's probably how it goes, right? Probably Burroughs and Dake were looking up to Varner and maybe Herbert or some of those guys and so on. You could keep going back, and this is just the way things happen, right? Older guys are there and kind of show the young guys the way, and now here we are passing it on.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay. I know you got practice coming up soon, but I wanted real quick, real easy question. Yianni Diakomihalis, I butchered that. Yianni Diakomihalis, who's your all-time favorite wrestler?
Probably Buvaisar Saitiev, R.I.P. Yeah. He was like a genius, innovator is the word. He had done things. He did things in the 80s and 90s that would make people in 2025 be like, what was that? He was a genius of the sport, and it's sad to see him pass away.
For sure. You have any, aside from being a great technician and a genius mind, is there like a match or any matches of his that stick out in your that you've seen obviously on YouTube or wherever?
Yeah, my dad used to make me watch this match. I think it's either the World Championship or the European Championship. He wrestles Alexander Leipold, was this guy from West Germany. Mm-hmm. And Leipold was like the first guy that I'd ever seen chronologically that far ankle scrambled. I mean, he was far ankle scrambling in like the 90s, which is funny because you still see people now who don't know it. Right? But he would far ankle scramble, and Saitiev, he wasn't a big shooter, but I think they had wrestled a previous match, and Leopold had won some scrambles against him. And then Satiev was just like very laid back. He'd wrestle a lot of 2-on-1s, hit a lot of like throws and judo stuff, but you wouldn't really say he wrestled overly hard, especially wasn't like pulling the head a lot. And then all of a sudden, Satiev goes out to wrestle Leopold, and you see him like he spends 5 minutes just snapping and snapping and snapping and pushing, punching hook, but not even using it to score, just punching hook to snap him again. And it was just complete like, whoa, who's this guy? And
Genius.
it kind of just shows like how good he was, where like, hey, this is his, his A style, right? This is how he preferred to wrestle, but this guy happened to be the perfect counter to it. So I'll pull out this completely other style of wrestling, this other move set, and beat you. And that's what he did. And it's a big testament, that for me, right, where it's like you can't just live and die by one sword, right? The narrative, like practice one kick 1,000 times, I do believe in, but also it's like practice 10 kicks 1,000 times and have 10 kicks that work,
Do you ever do that? Do you ever go and practice and be like, maybe just like in your head, like your A style is what we see most of the time, right? It's like, that's Yianni, that's how he wrestles. Do you ever go and like be like, I'm not wrestling my normal style today or this go or however you want to quantify it. Like now I'm focusing on whatever style B is, with the example that you just gave.
Yeah, kind of. A lot of it is like, hey, this is what I'm working on, and I don't care if I win or lose this go. I'm gonna hyperfixate on this area of focus until it clicks, right? So let's say I'm working on right hand collar tie, left hand hook, and you didn't see that a lot in my wrestling. It's like, well, I don't care if I could take this guy down 5 times. I'm gonna work this collar tie and hook until I can score with it, and then maybe we'll shift on to lefty high crotch, or we'll shift to an arm drag, or whatever nuance of my offense we're trying to improve is, right? And I think what's important about that is 2 things. For one, it's like, matches are for winning, right? Like practice is for practice. I'm practicing. That's why it's practice and not competition. So even in the live, right? Like I'm going to work on what I need to get better at, not just winning this live go, right? I want to win the go, but I'm going to do it through this avenue I've kind of forced myself to follow. I remember we used to talk about like me and Kyle, Dake, and Vito, right? Like Kyle and Vito, they don't have a ton of variety, but they've got 2 or 3 really good attacks that work. It's the equivalent of a baseball pitcher, like 110-mile-an-hour fastball. It's like right up the middle. You know it's coming, but it's hard to stop. Me, I wouldn't say I have a 110-mile-an-hour fastball, but I've got like 6 pretty good pitches. And, I can throw different ones at you. And because you don't really know which one's coming out of my hand, that's what makes it hard to hit. And that's kind of my goal as a wrestler is like, yeah, maybe I'm not the most athletically impressive guy. I'm not super fast or super strong or whatever, but you don't know what shot I'm about to take until I'm on your leg already.
Love it. Love it. Actually, if you had a question, you just made me think of this. Obviously, Vito, a teammate, Kyle, former teammate, they're both wrestling in Final X. Maybe just your take on them and their matchups and their opponents. Obviously, Vito's going to be wrestling Jax Forrest. You can give a prediction if you want, or just kind of maybe just what you think about that stylistically, that matchup, and then the same thing with Kyle and Zahid.
Yeah, I mean, with Vito and Forrest, you got to think both guys are going to score. I mean, I doubt Vito's going to win that match the way he did against Marcus Blaze, like those 3-1 low-scoring matches. Vito being so dangerous in parterre, I think is going to be good. It's like Forrest is going to score points, but also gives up points, right? And if Vito gets a takedown in the right position, he can lace him off the mat and end the match or gut him. I think that parterre factor is going to be really relevant. For Kyle, I think he's a little bit undersized against Zahid, but it looked like pace played a pretty big role at the Open. So you got to think that if Kyle can shut him down a little bit earlier and then blow the match open late, it's going to favor him, right? And I think the closer they wrestle to weigh-ins too, probably the better it is for Kyle, just because I'm not saying Zahid cuts a ton of weight, but it just doesn't give him as much time to get up, as it did maybe on a 8-hour weigh-in. I'm really excited for him. Obviously, it'd be great to have some old Cornell teammates on the team with me. But we'll see what happens. I think obviously both matches are going to be competitive, and the better guy's going to win, right?
Sure. And just last thing, aside from those, the answer can be yes or no. Is there any other matchup that you're interested in the results from Final X? Obviously, aside from yours.
I
pique
think
your
the
interest?
Carr and Mesenbrink series is going to be really good.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of really good matches. And even I went back and watched it. Like Mesenbrink teched him at the Open, but it was a lot of these, like, I don't want to say 50-50, but almost it was like David could have gone left or right and he would go right. And that happened to lead to a 4-pointer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To where it's like he got tech fault, but you're watching the match and you're like, he actually could probably win this too.
Yeah.
So I think that, even if it only goes 2 matches or if it goes 3 or, whoever wins, it's going to be pretty dynamic, exciting matches,
Yeah.
So I'm interested, if I was a fan, I'd be interested to watch.
It's funny. Nashon was on the show a week or two right after he retired. We were just talking about wrestling in general and the difference between folk style and freestyle. Like in folk style, if you could lose by 10, you got your ass kicked. You got dominated. You got beat up. In freestyle, you can lose by 10, like you said, and be like, that's a winnable match. Like it's just like
it's
salt
funny.
Positions. Like go one way or the other.
Like we had it happen. This kid Louis Sergio, he's on his gap year. At the Open, he lost to Brock Mantanona, like 14-5 or 14-6, which like on paper you're like he got his ass kicked, but it was like 4-3, and he didn't get taken. He gave up 10 points in one exchange. It was like a 4-point chest wrap that went 4-2, and then it was like he got crotch lifted and then chest wrapped and it went 2-2. And it was like all these things. I'm like, man, like if he literally didn't make that one initial mistake and just finish that takedown, he'd be up 5-4 with a minute to go. And that's where, it's like he came off the mat and he's all frustrated. I'm like, hey, literally doesn't matter. Like you can beat him and you're going to have to wrestle him in literally a month. So don't worry about it. He's like, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I'm like, you're good. Yeah. Like you're good. He's like, okay.
Yeah. I keep doing this.
But in folk style, you got beat by 9. It's like, all right, how can we stall?
It's so different.
Yeah, it's nuts.
One last thing, and I really will mean it unless another question pops in my head. A real American freestyle, right? That this league, I'm sure you've heard about it, Hulk, and all this. Have they talked to you? Are you interested or have thoughts on it? Or I don't know, right? This is all brand new. It's kind of exciting, right? It really can have a multi-million-dollar league, and we can make this happen. Man, cool. But I don't know. Are you into it? Have you talked to anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard from anybody, so whatever that means. Maybe it's a me thing.
Would you be?
I conceptually, I think it's cool. You know what I mean? I'm obviously in favor of a league. I think if we can deliver wrestling in a marketable way, people are going to watch. And selfishly, right, I would enjoy being a part of a league, but also like being like if I join a wrestling league and it works, and then it's like, man, I was one of the guys that helped like pioneer that. Not really pioneer, but one of the first guys. Like that's a really cool, memorable thing. But additionally, I just think what we're doing now, right, with this whole NCAA season, World Championship season, it reminds me of racehorsing, right? Like everyone watches the Kentucky Derby, but those actually aren't the fastest horses. And I think people comparing it back to wrestling, we all really like college wrestling. Obviously, there's a jump to the senior level. I think if we can deliver that product the same way that NCAA wrestling delivers college wrestling, it could be even more popular, right? So if there's any way I can support, the growth of the league, I'd love to. But yeah, I haven't heard from him. Yeah.
Well, let's call the Hulkster. Come on, brother. This is Yianni Diakomihalis. He's a 4-time national champ, world silver.
I gotta grow my mustache out.
Yeah. You gotta start talking shit. I don't know about that, but
maybe I gotta be more of a villain.
I think that they want to bring the personalities out more, and I'm not, it'll be interesting to see how that's all fostered. And I hope you do get a call, and these guys all know who you are, so it'd be silly to not.
No, I'm just being goofy,
But it would be cool, right? I think you're the top dogs. They should give you a call. So
it'd be cool.
We'll poke them on social media and say, hey, give Yianni a call, guys. Cool.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, Yianni. Well, I burdened you with 5 extra questions or something like that, but I appreciate the time as always. It's always great to talk to you. We'll let you get to practice, but I'll give you the final word. Anything you want to say about anything?
No, thank you for having me on. People have been asking about the new shoes.
All right.
They're going to come out soon. I promise they're coming out, end of May, early June. So just wanted to throw that out there. I know people have been asking. I've been getting messages and texts and all sorts of things. They're going to be coming out soon. So just keep an eye out on that. Thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for supporting those and supporting me. It means a lot. Obviously, it helps me stay in the sport longer, but also, it's something I really take a lot of pride in. So just want to say thank you for all the people who kind of support me, through that or through other means. I really appreciate it.
You going to be wearing those shoes at Final X?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. They'll be on display. June 14th, Final X. Yianni's going to be taking on PJ Duke and Newark, New Jersey. It's all going down right there. It'll be live on Flow. So appreciate you, Yianni. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. And we'll see y'all next time. Adios.
Thank you.
Thanks.